This event is an experiment, which we call the Human Collage. It's a collaboration between myself and Starseed, Ivana, and Julie, who is tucked away over there now. Starseed is unique. I want you guys to know a little bit about what they do, because they create artful events that are more than just a typical spectacle of, performer and audience. They create collaborative, intimate, experimental happenings motivated by a playful and trusting collaboration, by joy, and which center the mystical and the metaphysical. I'm honored and grateful to be collaborating with them, because I can't imagine feeling free enough to create and talk quite like this in the other contest. So today's going to involve me talking and showing some slightly blurry images, and also some simple activities that you're invited to take part in, and then a time for questions and discussion at the end. And I want you to know, though, no one is going to be called on.
Like you just did. Thank you.
Participation is voluntary. No one will be on the spot. I say this for the introverts among us, of which I am one. So I said this is an experiment, and this is partly because this talk combines a broader variety of elements than a typical talk I've given, but it's also because of the combination of who we all are here today, and that makes it an experiment as well. We're sharing attention. So let's begin. I'm going to start with a piece of a story I wrote about a character I call Alice. Sitting in the room, she drew pictures on the wall. She drew pictures so that she could cry, big, wet, dropping tears that she caught in a paper cup to save for later. She stored her sorrows secretly, like a rat in a cellar. In the living room, the walls were white and bare, a perfect palette for the collage, the colors, the pictures, the scraps of printed paper, which started in the center of the wall and to which she added haphazardly, occasionally, but tenaciously. The wall was a puzzle with no method. It was a creation in which she was trying to find the question and the answer all at once. She created as a sculptor, seeking to uncover the form that was already there, but despairing, becoming frustrated, as she had no clue as to its shape. So she would work in fits and starts, on immediate impulses, then for days not add at all to this collage, until the time came again when she was drawn by a shadow that needed to be given substance. One of my earliest memories is of being in our backyard in New Haven, Connecticut, and I might have been in a hammock or on my mother's lap, I'm not sure, and I remember it was warm and sunny. What I most remember is this green inchworm that's sort of dangling lower and lower as it spun its thread. I remember its color vividly. The intensity of the green, the spring yellow green. I remember the way it moved in the air like a dancer. It was a moment of awe, of aesthetic joy. So I'm describing this to you now, and maybe you can have a picture in your mind. In each of your minds right now, there's like maybe another picture of what I described happening, but none of those are the exact same thing as the experience that I had when I was little. And indeed, me sitting here now describing it is also a different experience than I had in the moment. So our experience comes through our senses. Even if we share the moment with others, each person is experiencing it through the lens of their own senses. I find this reality a little bit lonely, a bit poignant. Those moments of beauty or of pain, really of anything we experience, are a little bit separate from everyone else. So how do we connect? How do we share our experiences? Through language, we describe things, we tell each other stories, we tell ourselves stories, we store our lives in stories. Still, that visceral moment of experience is fascinating to me, and it's why I'm an artist. When I took my first drawing class, I was hugely frustrated. I was trying to draw the model's knee, and it looked wrong, and I was trying so hard and getting more and more frustrated, and to the point where I was fighting back tears. And the teacher I had was particularly wise and gentle. She was working with me on what about the knee worked, or wasn't quite capturing it. And she saw my tears. She didn't push me. But when the class met again after a break, she read something by John Berger, and this writing was about the beauty and the value in just fully seeing. That the drawing itself was almost incidental. The point was to really look and to see. So I'm grateful to that teacher, not just for her kindness and skill in that moment, but also because she shone a light on that moment of seeing. Me as a child, looking at that green inchworm, the wonder of seeing and feeling reality by using all of my senses. I make art because it's a way to spend time in that moment, to bring all my senses to bear, and to give them a voice. It's a practice of paying attention, of seeing and allowing my feelings and thoughts and stories to be part of that scene. So last September, as most of you know, I had a solo show at the Coffee Society of Boston, titled Embodied, and I made a book of the same title, including writing and all the paintings from that show, and I'm going to share a little bit of that with you now. So, in a world of speedy conclusions and conflicting certainties, art makes space for the unresolved, for uncertainty and not knowing. From that space, a tenderness and openness can emerge. The paintings in Embodied explore the vulnerability and universality of inhabiting a human body in our social world. Our bodies are exquisitely imperfect conduits to pleasure, pain, and connection. Our breath tells us that we are alive, even as our limitations remind us of our mortality. Collectively, we as human beings all share the singular experience of living in this human vessel, the body. Yet our bodies are also that which can lead us to feel separate, different. Appearances are used to construct and justify social inequalities. Comparison to others can be a source of personal insecurity. By what standards do we measure our appearance? When we are seeing others, do we relate to the underlying sameness of the human experience or the differences of our socially constructed one? What risks do we take and do we avoid as we ask these questions? So vulnerability can be a superpower. It opens the door to creativity, to authenticity, and when coupled with a willingness to sit with discomfort, the possibility for deeper connectedness. I am moved by figures from the ancient world, carved, handcrafted figures of large-bodied women, their lushness, and the way that they were made thousands of years ago. It's like stepping outside of culture and across time to the simple humanity of the body, the lush, large, round female body. This figure is from Southwest Arabia, was made in the 4th century BCE. I love looking at these figures. I like drawing them, making lino cut prints of them. They show up in my paintings here. This is another figure, also from the same time period. I call this painting, Did I Dream the Goddess or Did She Dream Me? And that one's back here. So I also draw myself. I'm working on a self-portrait at the moment, and I have a lot of resistance to doing it. But there's also something beautiful about it, seeing myself as I am. So in my studio, more abstract sometimes, I have to set aside judgment, just see shapes, shadows, colors. I also like to explore the inside of my experience, being in my body. How can I express that? I call this body energy self-portrait. I try through the practice of self-portraiture to see myself truly and fully, to reject nothing, to notice the judgments I make without allowing them to invalidate any of me or my thoughts or feelings. In that experience I had as a child of wonder, looking at that green inchworm, I was fully immersed in the moment. in my senses. Nothing was excluded. There was no voice in me yet that was judging or deeming some things real and true and others not, or some things worthy of attention and others not. So, being can be a noun, a human being. Being can be a verb, us being here together. A noun is singular. We seek to name it, understand it, identify it. We use language to do this. Language is concerned with identity and naming through properties. It seeks to pin down the world into categories to create bodies of knowledge. But language, while it gets all the attention, actually cannot directly touch the experience of being. It can describe, but not actually be. Experience, being, is bigger than what language allows for. Being is multiple, not singular, not inboundable. The philosopher Alain Badiou says that between thought and the real, there's a hole, an abyss. He calls that which is unnamed and not thought the void. The void is present in everything. It's the unseen, the unknown. It's that which cannot be reduced to words. The void is that from which all existence emerges. It's where creativity comes from. Knowledge that comes through language is limited because it does not make room for the void. Knowledge matters. It's just that it's important to recognize it's not the whole world and that it can limit what we see. While I was sitting and writing this talk, part of my mind was chattering and thinking, wait, these ideas don't hang together and my talk isn't done, I need to finish this. I want what I say to be provable and true, because it feels vulnerable to speak to you all. I want to pin things down and to have firm, clear ideas to share with you. But in the process, as I wrote, I kept telling myself to trust, to let the ideas flow through me, around me. I cut from one document to another. I read things that I'd written about this topic in the past, and the more I let it all flow through me, and just grabbed an idea here and an idea there, and let myself not worry yet if it would string into one narrative, one message or story, the more I could kind of pulse with the multiplicity of ideas that just tangle around each other. That is the creative process that I seek to enter into. So as I sat writing the talk, I heard the anxious voice that wanted to know that my talk was what it was saying and wanted to make sure it would be good and make sure it made sense in some singular way. And I don't mean to dismiss those things, right? I mean, they matter too. But the creative process is at its best when I can let those not be the drivers of it. When I can let knowing and good sit in the back seat and pay more attention to this pulsing of ideas that intermingle, that may contradict, that may or may not fit together. When I can let my attention wander to what pulls it and make room for the things that I can only see out of the corner of my eyes. There's a pleasure in this, a creative aliveness in doing this. This is what I do in Collage. Let it all be there, be fully present for this immediate moment of making a mark and not get worried about how it's going to fit with the rest. It's the difference between forcing something into a shape and allowing a shape to just emerge, between insisting on a single thread and recognizing that a tangle of threads will most likely make up a full weave. It is partnering with the void. As I paint or draw, as I allow myself to be in relationship with the painting, to ask it questions, to explore, something can emerge that's beyond my intention, beyond my current knowledge or skill or thought patterns. The key here is recognizing that the void, the unknown, the uncertain are the heart of the creative process. They are at the heart of being. Now, since my earliest time working with Starseed and meeting with Starseed, they always brought in a moment of meditation or movement, something to get us present in our bodies. And Ivana now is going to lead us in an activity to let us explore the void a bit further in an embodied way. Thank you, Ivana.
Thank you for having us. Welcome. my art has always been through my body and my, I would say, connection to source in a movement way. I taught yoga for many years because I just loved how I felt. Not necessarily putting my body in a pose, but more like Robin just talked about, like allowing the pose to take shape. And once I found the length of my arms and my legs, and once I found my breath, I would have a little hit of like, ooh, presence. So thank you for inviting me to do this part with you and weave it in. It will look like meditation. You're welcome to keep your eyes open or closed. This sound just does it for me instantly, so I'm gonna share it with you a couple of times. Allowing yourself to simply come into the space of presence, feeling your feet on the ground, allowing your hips to be supported by your seat, feeling the length of your spine. A long spine is to me, a long spine is that moment in which I take space and I claim my value and worth to be here. Lengthening the back of your neck, softening your face, relaxing your forehead, allowing your breath to move freely. Couple rounds here. I often feel the artist in me that will never show or forget self, show what's in there. And there are moments like this where I dare feel that which could be written or painted or felt. As intimate, as private as this moment of presence is with that expression, that free expression, vulnerable and honest, the voice, the words, the images that simply want to express. They all come from this place, this presence, this void. Maybe one day they will be shown, maybe not. Maybe one day they will be presented in a talk. Robin is inspiring. Maybe not. Nonetheless, they're here, they're present. They are real. From this place, I invite you to connect and again feel this art, the spirit. Maybe it stays sacred and secret in your heart. Again, maybe it travels to your hand, becomes visible. That will be a very individual journey. But the moment we all just drop in and feel presence, that which I call spirit, art, we become connected to this vulnerable, sacred place within us, that sacred secret. To me, that is the starseed. Allowing your body to breathe. living, creating, feeling, being, all one. Feel your feet on the ground, feel your legs and your pelvis and your long spine and your open heart, your neck, your throat, your soft face. Gently breathing, allowing your eyes to maybe open, maybe not yet. I've been thinking a lot about this. All the amazing art that will never be shown or seen. And I'm so grateful for the art that is shown and seen. But you know, there's something unlocking, like if we were all so free to create, and I think as artists everybody knows this, it's redundant, but if we were all so free to fully create without having the pressure to, like, you know, show it or sell it, or there's something really rich happening right now that's unlocking. And I think this is how these groups are coming together. And I'm really excited to see what that is, you know? So thank you for opening the space for us and sharing all this amazing, beautiful art.
Thank you, Alana.
Thank you, everybody.
So, I mean, I love what you said, Alana. I think that, you know, it's not just about whether or not we necessarily show art. I think that there can be a lot of reasons it's hard to get to the place of even letting ourselves have some of the ideas, you know, feeling that I don't know if it's confidence, I don't know what it is, but that space to be able to really go there. So, thank you. I'm from lightning, mud, and a cloudy blue sky. Blues and bold moods on meandering jazz with sharp, discordant notes. I am a vine that spreads and twines. I am wind and also fire. I bark, I bite, I whimper, I moan. I paint the flowers as they open. In the Renaissance, I am reborn of ideas, art, and love of beauty. Traveling makes me homesick. The familiar makes me restless. I am a homebody with wanderlust. I fight back tears at parties and smile at funerals. I am from the clash of dreams and brass tacks, crushed in the grinding of years between the two. I am a frog in the mud and a red-winged blackbird singing my buzzbird in marsh grasses. I try, but only until success looks likely. I'm a spinning head, a tight chest, a full belly. My eye twitches when I long for thunder. I'm still when I want to dance or fight, still like the bird who sees the cat, or the cat who sees the mouse. I am many experiments and few conclusions. So in relationship with each other here today, I invite you to be curious, to be in your own bodies and experience, and see if you can make room for us to create this experience together without necessarily even knowing what that means or what it will be. It can be kind of frightening to cozy up to the unknown, to uncertainty. We live in a world where knowledge is stored in language is seen as the way to be safe, more secure. And certainly there's a lot of ways in which that's true. I'm really glad that there's knowledge that furthers science so that we have better health options, and I love reading bodies of ideas that tell me things about the world. But placing one's full sense of security in knowing alone can actually create anxiety, because there's always going to be gaps in knowledge. And also because we have excluded being, that moment of presence. When we limit our definition of what is real, true, and valid to what is knowable, that which can be proven in language, we're excluding void, the experience of presence. The unknowable, the uncertain are central to the experience of being. When only knowledge is seen as valid, we invalidate and exile enormous parts of ourselves. Feeling uncertain, being in a place of not knowing, can just feel like ignorance or weakness, rather than a rich source of creativity that it is. Instead of being willing to step into the void, we reject it as dangerous, something to be fixed, a sign that something is wrong. We come to fear the very heart of our aliveness. So this comes out when talking about art in particular. Seeing comes first, as John Berger said. Talking about art, trying to translate it into meaning made up of words, is another thing entirely. So I'm going to show you a short video where South African artist William Pentridge is interviewing himself as he plays with these questions. So, I love that video. I always feel like in my studio there's a lot of different versions of me having very different points of view on what's happening. So critical theorist Theodore Adorno wrote about aspects of our modern culture, which he called the culture industry, where everything's perceived only from the point of view that it can serve as something else. Everything has value only insofar as it can be exchanged, and not in and of itself. Advertising and consumer culture is all about creating a craving that is never meant to be truly satisfied. It creates and takes advantage of a restlessness of attention. This has an impact on how we relate to art. We as a culture, I feel, don't really know how to look at art or make sense of it. It can be hard to know how to truly connect to works of art. Instead, we might ask, do you sell your work? Or compare it to another artist's work, and so we can place it in a category as a way to understand it. And I don't mean to fault any of us for this. This is what our culture trains us to do, to decide a thing's worth based on its monetary value, or by comparison to some existing categories of knowledge. It can be difficult to know how to relate to our work that's in front of us. What I personally would wish for people interacting with my work is for them to have the patience to sit and look for a little bit, and to ask themselves how they feel looking at it. Ask themselves what it might make them think of, take a trip down of associative thinking, to be curious, and to have the practice of connecting to their own experiences before substituting meaning or knowledge or worth as defined by a price tag. I had a show of my work at the Glen Urquhart School a year or so ago, and as part of that, I put in a box for kids to tell me what they thought of the work. So this was the form. I said, the artist invites you to share your thoughts and experience. Look at one or more of the paintings. Sit and close your eyes for 10 seconds and notice how your body feels. Then write or draw about these questions. What sensations come up? What questions arise? What memories arise? And so this particular kid was not really into it. What questions, sensations come up? Blandness. What questions arise? Why am I counting to 10? Which is a fair question. And what memories arise? None. So not into it. But other kids were really kind of into it. I love this one. Weird and cool and witty. I felt free. It is abstract. It is confusing and understanding at the same time, which I thought was rather delightful. The artist so complexity, but I do not understand the meaning. So this is someone who already is like, I need to know what it means. This isn't working for me entirely. And then this kid, I love this. They just said what they saw. Eyes, sun, faces, checkers, yellow eye. I feel flowy, pretty, cool. I like it. It makes me feel so alive, connected, which is kind of really particularly beautiful, I thought. So I usually start my work or time in the studio with kind of free expressive mark making. I scribble, I pick colors that are calling to me that day. I try and access a place of playfulness before the struggle of deciding what does or doesn't work in a painting. I set my attention to the connection between my inner self and my hand without going through subject matter, language, or meaning. I let the marks be messy, not pretty. The scribbles have this aliveness. They're their own beings. This one says, I'm small and quiet today, and this one says, I'm loud. This one tangles around that one and erases another one. So what I like is to let the marks build up on top of each other over time. I'm going to share with you a painting where I set myself an intention of this would be something I just add marks to anytime I'm in the studio. It's never meant to be finished in any kind of way. So just start there, big marks, right? And I was into cuneiform at the time, so that showed up there. A figure came in, the figure went away, right? So just really, you know, about whatever moves called to me that day. And that's where it's ended up. It's not finished, and you know, I haven't shaped it in a way that's going to feel finished, but I love the history that you can see that comes of layering marks and the freedom to do so. So, as part of that show I mentioned at the Glen Urquhart School, I also came in one day as a guest teacher for the 2nd grade and 5th grade art classes. And I had them do an activity where I set an emotion and I asked them to make marks on paper with pencil expressing that emotion. And these are the instructions I gave them. I said, take a moment, close your eyes if you want to, and think about an experience where you were excited. Let yourself notice how it felt in your body. Maybe you had butterflies in your stomach. Maybe it was hard to sit still. And I have to say, when I did this in the 2nd grade class, when I said the thing about the butterflies in the stomach, this one little girl got this horrified look on her face because she had never heard that expression. And I had to say, not literally, not really, it's okay. So now, take that energy and make some marks on the paper. Let your hand move around and don't worry about the way it looks. Just feel it. Make a line, a scribble, a shape. The goal is not to draw some object or recognizable item, and instead you are just making a mark. Letting your hand move around while feeling that feeling. There's no right or wrong here, it's an experiment. And kids, of course, access this freedom of expression much more easily than adults can. By the time we got to anger as an emotion, they were stabbing the pencils through the paper rather energetically. So what I'd like is for us to do the same activity, working on this painting here. We're working on top of another group that did the same activity. And in fact, let me show you. So that was how it started, and this is where it is now. So what I want us to do is take a moment and, well, I just want to say, like, when you're here as a group, it's one thing when you're alone in your studio or wherever else to say, okay, I'm going to tap into some free expressiveness. Maybe that's easy for you and maybe it's not. But I do think it's different when you're with other people. I think it's different when you know you're being observed. I think it's different when you know your mark is going to be seen. And so part of why I want to do this as a group is to kind of notice those tensions. We're going to each take time and go up and, you know, make a mark, and I'll walk you through how we're going to go about that as well. But I'm hoping that what we can do is each of us notice what it's like making a mark when other people are here, making a mark when it's going to be seen, and then talk about what that's like. So, actually, let's hold it up for a moment, you know, the painting as it painted, guys, as it exists now. So, if you look at what, you know, was done before, right, do you see moods in the existing marks? Does it get lost because there's so many marks? Can you look at it and see it without deciding whether or not you like it as a painting? Can you connect to energy that is there? So I thought let's just take a minute and really just look, which is something that I think a lot of times is hard to do. Just sit with it. So as we keep looking, I'm going to describe what we're going to do. One person at a time is going to go up and make a mark on it. We have woody stabilo pencils that are really fun to make marks with. There's a cup of water there. If you dip the pencil in the water, it does something different, which is kind of fun. think about a time, I'm going to write all of this, think about a time when you felt strong emotions sometimes. As a group, we're going to do that together, that part. And I'm going to encourage you to notice sensations in your body that were associated with that experience. You won't be asked to share the details of the experience in case that brings any concern for anyone. You don't have to tell anyone what you're feeling, but just notice. Try and embody, not just in the head, but in the body and feeling. And then we're going to take turns to go out and make marks on the painting. And again, when you go up, I encourage you to be curious about what it feels like, right? To notice if there are voices that tell you what is and is not okay to do. How easy or difficult is it to feel what is in your body and to move your hand with those feelings, particularly in this context, right? How conscious are you that the rest of us are here? Does that change the mark you make or your freedom of doing so? Each mark is a moment, a feeling, a person. It's a layer of marks. It's all of us being here together. And much as I love to leave it really open-ended, I'm going to have to say, just make a single mark and sit back down so that we can move on to the conversation as well. So first I'm going to read you a little bit more from my story at Alice, the collage story. Sometimes it is as if my body is trying to draw pictures for me, draw shapes from the color. I have something to say. I have something to say. I feel it in the tension around my eyes and at the back of my neck. I walk down the street and it dogs me, like a fly, a constant hum, an insidious distraction. I have something to say. My body has something to say to me. It aches for no apparent reason. The bones of my skull clench. I try to escape it, covering my ears. I tell myself it's a headache and take an aspirin. I eat chocolate. I exercise. The tension eases briefly, but the sense of urgency and refusal to rest do not. I will be heard, it says. I will be heard. So I want you all now to take a moment and think of a time when you felt maybe excited, maybe when you felt love, maybe when you felt sad, frightened. That's usually one that can bring up really visceral spirit feelings. Maybe angry. So take a minute and really think specifically about that event in your life. Right? Can you think how it felt in your body? Did it make you think about other things? Were there any tastes? Were there any smells? Did the energy of it move fast or slow? Was it staccato or smooth? Loud or quiet? And so now one by one we're going to open, you open your eyes and walk up to the painting and try and connect to that place and make a mark. Now I'll go first. So. So as other people are going,
this was my own talk, just a couple minutes.
So we're not going to see exactly what mark they're making, but notice what's happening as you watch someone else do it. Do you feel squirmy for them? Do you feel I don't know, like what do you feel, There's just something about our mark being seen. That tender moment of creativity being seen, even though they're not seeing what you're thinking or feeling. I think there's something that happens where we can lose connection to that place in us simply because we lose that. There you go. I have to say, well, before, we had people go up in groups, which made it more comfortable.
2 by 2, right?
2 by 2, 3 by 3.
Yeah.
But I think that to really notice what's happening, there's a way in which it's valuable to do it. It's fine because I'm interested in that place where the consciousness or self-consciousness meets the expressiveness, and whether or not one can really tap into that. So, the people who already did it, I don't do it. Can I invite you to say a word or a sentence about what that was like for you, Yana?
It felt good. Really, I'm actually very angry these days, and so it felt good to just let it be there and not try to make it go away and be nice and all the rest of it.
And you, how about you, Julie? A word, a sentence.
Yeah, well, aside from seeing having the mark be seen, it was so fun. I thought, oh, this is a intense moment, but then I saw all of this like high frequency joy coming out on the page, right? Yellow, and then it was just like a happy moment to just be free and release it. So
You hit both ends of the spectrum.
yeah, so I like came into it like all clenched up, and then it was like, oh, look at nice high frequency release. Yeah, it's good.
How about you, Lana?
I think I'm at this threshold of letting things be seen. So it's very, like, the timing of this talk is perfect.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, I have a feeling there's something coming out of me that will be shown to the public, which I never thought it would. I mean, I didn't know, but, so, yeah, I was just being brave. Like my mark.
And isn't it kind of fascinating that you have to be brave to just go and scribble on one panel?
I know!
It's really interesting, right?
Yes!
I mean,
It's just like,
it's sort of like, you know?
right. You still have to be brave.
Yeah, but it's just so interesting that that's the case, you know? But I think that if you know, there's something about expression itself that can be hard to make room for in a full way. Yeah. So,
You know what I really liked was that it wasn't words. Because
yeah.
I'm a writer, and sharing words is very hard because you're really you're showing
Yes.
yourself. So this is sort of a secret reveal,
It's
right?
true.
You
It's
know
true.
what's behind the
Yeah.
expression.
Yeah, it's true.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you.
How about you, Susan?
Well, it's nice to have two marks on my hands.
That's right.
I just have to say, Nadine was my best friend.
Yes.
So, I just was so and so it was a release. My marks are about Nadine's.
Thank you, Susan. Well, it's like there's so many. I just feel like what happens inside of us in any given moment, like here we all are, but we all have lives that have this gamut of difficulty and emotion, and I don't know. It's not that there's not space for that. It's that some things are, what's the word, inchoate, right? They're not things that words alone, you know, you can describe what you're feeling. Like you said, you're feeling grief and you're missing your friend. But there's a whole world behind that. And I think that's what I love about art, and is that at least it's a way for me to tap into that a little bit. But still, it's interesting because, you know, what Julie said about, you know, it's not specific, but it's expressive. So, Elizabeth, what was the light for you?
Well, I think I had a lot of dread.
Yeah.
I was actually shy. And it was resisting pre-planning. And I got out there and it felt very spontaneous.
Yeah.
And like new. Like I didn't do anything, I was resisting pre-planning. It was fun.
Kind of interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks. Do I get to put Cheryl on the spot, or
You
should
do
I
not.
I do not. That's fair.
No.
That's legit.
I will go to Cheryl's spot.
the first thing I noticed was the sound from everyone else doing it. And I'm actually started more in performance and music. And so as an interdisciplinary, I was very interested about how similar and how different the various art forms are. So for a musician, this is very normal. Frankly, and, you know, for a certain kind of musician, classically trained, there's folk music, there's, so it's very interesting to listen to that conversation with that lens, because I'm also a visual artist and sit by myself all the time. So.
But that's interesting. So for you, I'm curious if the bridging, like audience and expressiveness, is more natural. Does it happen more naturally?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's actually, you know, to incorporate other people in my artistic practice has been part of it from the beginning. As both a teacher and a performer.
Yeah.
I have a question. Do you see sound? Like
No.
when you go
I wish. That would be lovely. But they do, they collaborate. They connect. I don't have whatever that is. There's a specific synesthesia.
Yes.
Right? But you know, sounds have texture. And it's interesting how much of the same language we use about very different experiences with such similarities. So complex.
And how is it for you?
Frame.
Yeah. Well, and thank you for saying that. And I won't put you on the spot more, but I just want to acknowledge it is scary. Like, there is a way in which fully being seen can be a little terrifying, right? Even in a place where maybe we know people, where it's, you know, no one's going to hurt you here. But isn't it funny how just imagining going up there, it feels like someone might kill you. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know, it's weird, but it's a thing. So, thank you. Who else went? Ruth, how was it for you?
Yeah, I mean, I just kind of felt this where I live.
Exactly.
You know, but I was very conscious of getting skinnier, and we're in the opposites here.
Yeah.
And the chair, the bones of my bum were like in the chair, and so all I wanted to do when I went up and draw was just this long skinny thing, you know? That's where I was coming from.
Yeah. And so that's a real habit for you of just expressing. There's not a lot of barriers between you and expressing your experience.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that shows in your work, if I may say, in a beautiful way. It's wonderful. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to say anything? You don't have to.
I do. I'm not an artist. Just putting that out there. Apparently, I need to say that.
This is where it's made, meaning we say hello, Ellen.
Hello. I'm here. I think I started thinking, like you were saying, you know, can you just go and express? When I knew there was like an assignment, I started thinking.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then I started to try to relax my mind and think about like narrative and feelings and memories, and that really helped, I think. And then when I got up there, I realized like I wasn't able to really mark hard. I just could just kind of lightly. So I don't know if that's about like the frame of mind or what that has to do with, you know, creativity and storytelling. But it felt like just kind of a more delicate kind of touching of the surface, if that makes sense.
Did you?
Joan, no, yeah.
Well, I want to respond to Ellen for a second. I just wasn't sure if Joan had gone already.
No. I went and did that, but I haven't spoken yet.
But I just want to say, like, I think it's really interesting. Like, I love that you said you found yourself not marking hard. Like, there is something about making a mark where maybe it connects to the emotion, right? I mean, certainly if I'm angry, but there can be a tentativeness. Like, you know, like, how much am I willing to commit to what I'm saying or feeling? How much am I willing to show it? You know, maybe it's a tender thing that is light for that reason, but sometimes it's tentative in a way of like, I don't know if I really want to be seen in this way, you know. Yeah, so thanks. Yeah. Thank you, Joe.
I really needed to hear the word void today. And that is very, very important to me. It's just, you know how sometimes you just need to hear something?
Yeah.
And that was, and I can explain and expound another time, but I needed to hear that. So I did a little void right in the middle of it.
I love it. That's great. Yeah. How about you, Ms. Reed?
That felt great.
Do you want to actually, is that everyone? Is that
I
everyone?
think that's it. Yeah, do you want me to hold it up?
Yeah. I want to know what it's like for Pam.
Yeah, I've had a lot of death recently, so I chose black. But then I got into it, and I wanted to continue working on the whole.
Yeah. Come back. Yeah. You can do that, definitely. Yeah. Mary Beth, did you say? I can't remember. I apologize.
I don't need to.
You don't need to. Fair enough. Yeah. Yeah. So how about if we take a minute and just look? So the interesting thing is there were each of those moments, each person was like having their own experience, intense, non-intense, whatever. But now it's a whole thing. Now it's a room of us. Now it's a painting of many marks. It's kind of interesting. And, you know, I'm sure with many artists in the room, you know, and I do this too, I look at myself like, well, it doesn't really look, the composition's a little off, but it sort of sells short what it is, you know? It's just marks in this moment today that we're all layering on top of that. Yeah.
But somehow we can't not see that we're part of the composition.
That was beautifully said.
Can you say it louder?
We can't not see that we're part of a composition.
Right? Yeah, we're each there. So I'm gonna wrap up by reading you a little more of Alice's story. This is the end of her story, and it's in her own words. I feel like my skin has slid off, and I'm there without outer cover. Like or dislike or a language I no longer speak, there's simply knowing. Touch, feel, essence, smell, sight, and closeness. For the last 2 nights, I dreamed of the ocean, the waves rolling in, crashing in at twilight. I could smell the salty air. The second night, it was as if there was a song being whispered between the waves, as if there were sirens or mermaids, and what they sang was my name over and over again. So before we move into just general question, conversation, snacking, I want to say thank you one more time to Julie and Ivana for all that they do and for valuing events that are not about masses of people, but are instead about this kind of intimacy and openness and authenticity. It's really special. So thank you both so much. Yeah. So does anyone have any more general questions, thoughts they want to share?
Just am curious when you wrote that story.
So that's kind of interesting. That beginning part of it, I still remember I wrote it when I was in college. So 37 years ago. Yeah. And it just came out. Like I could picture where I was sitting, you know, it just came out. And then the rest of it, probably 10 or more years later. Yeah, so very just. You mean the part about Alice in particular?
Yes.
Yeah.
Were you studying art then?
Not at all. No, I really thought art was for people who were born knowing how to make art. I thought art was great, but I didn't think that, I didn't have that, I didn't have a sense of permission for myself to make art. Yeah.
When did that change?
You know what, it changed when I got thyroid cancer.
When you what?
I got thyroid cancer.
Oh.
And, and I'm fine. But, and I even knew at the time that, the prognosis was good, but I would, I think that's when it changed. Because I'd always kind of wanted to. I always liked art. I made collages and that kind of thing, so. But when I had gotten over the treatments and all and was sorted again, this workshop came up, a collage workshop, and I went to that workshop, and since then, it's been pretty central in my life.
So when was that?
2007. Not quite 20 years. Yeah. A while. It's been a while. Yeah.
And have the ancient
mother figures been there from the beginning?
No, that's pretty recent. Well, that's the last few years, last couple of years. I was at the MFA one day and I came across this book, Idols, The Power of Images. And it's actually amazingly free as a PDF online. If anyone wants it, I can send you a link. But yeah, so I just love the figures. And working with, I think most of you know I work with a teacher, Amber Spoon, and I've worked with her over a number of years. And the practice of looking, drawing from what I look at, but as a way to really be connected to what I'm looking at, is something that I got out of working with her. So,
A lot of times it's been said that drawing is learning how to see.
Exactly.
And that's why anyone can learn that.
Yeah.
That's why William Kentridge, the artist, said yes, art.
That's right. Exactly. I love that. Yeah.
However, I've always had a acuity for seeing. People have told me about it. But I feel like my hands and body can't reproduce. So.
Well, but it's kind of interesting. I mean, it sounds like, I think what you're saying is you see well, but then what you draw doesn't look like what you're seeing. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
At least that, yeah.
Yeah. But the interesting thing is, it's almost like, think of a blind contour. I'll say most of the artists, a blind contour is when you're looking at something and you're not looking at the paper, and you're just letting your hand move around. And as you look more and more, you see more and more detail. You make more and more connections. And it does not matter what the paper looks like. So that's kind of the extreme example as a practice of seeing. And I think, like I told you when I took my first figure drawing class, I was so frustrated by the fact that it did not look right. Right? That I couldn't really stay with seeing. One of the things Amber taught me that I love is that drawing is really all about correcting. That's the process of drawing.
It's all about what?
Correcting, right? Oh. You start and you're like, wait, that's not right. So instead of that's not right is a failure, no, that's the drawing. That's the seeing. It's like, what's not right? Is it, it's the needle, what's that line? And it is hard to stay in a place of curiosity and not be in a frustration, verge of tears, whatever. But I think that's one of the things that I have cultivated and valued most in drawing, because then you're staying with that curiosity, you're staying with that, as opposed to I am invalid and no good because my drawing is not correct. You're staying in relationship with, what am I looking at? You're staying in relationship with, wow, these things don't match. I wonder what that's about, right? I mean, easier said than done, but that for me is what I want to be doing.
I just always thought that all the things you say, yes, and in answer to Ed, it's more like, just keep doing it. It's in the practice of it. It's the continual, not for perfection, but just for seeing and for translating and finding an excitement in the line or, a search. But it's depending on how detailed you want to be, the practice could be for years, and continuous, if that's what you want.
The seeing is calming and healing. The drawing, and I have the best success at this with my non-dominant hand, it feels dangerous and revealing and vulnerable and hard to push through.
You know how you said, Ruth, when you went out to the panel, you were like, it's fine, this is just what I do? That's not true for a lot of people. For a lot of people, to just stay with it actually is really difficult. And there's a lot of emotions that come up that make it difficult.
Well, I think I felt more that way when I was 40 or 50.
Yeah.
But, after so many years of being in this process, it's no different. Difficult, might be putting me in a yoga class. We all have these things that have nourished us for so many years that are a comfort place and a searching place and a working place.
Well, and I love that that's how it is for you.
Right, I get it.
Yeah.
And I wonder if the question is, what is the art that is your comfort place? Because I feel like you said earlier, I'm sorry, Ellen, that you're not an artist, but I do believe that everybody is an artist.
Yes.
And so I just think it is like tapping into that practice or that ritual that you feel is feeding your soul, where you have those moments of discovery and self-discovery.
So I was going to say, I was not an artist and would explain that to you until it's now 10 years. Some Rocky Neck artists started saying that's not true. And then Yana stuck some paint and paper in my hand.
Yana's good at that.
Yeah.
Opens people up.
I think we look at artists or look at art as something better. Like everyone. I don't know if everyone's an artist. I really don't. I don't want everyone to be. But I do think everyone can learn to see better. And that can help if one wants to learn to draw.
Right.
And I think in seeing we gain so much because the world is so fast and there's so much going on. It's very hard to slow down and focus and really take in nature or something beautiful or important. And so that's where that's what I think you can teach. That one can teach to see better. And it sounds like you may have a lot of stuff, about the product. I know, Ed, how could you do that? Not either. But, you can't, if your goal is to make paintings that people will look at, or drawings that people will look at and be able to say, oh, look at this, it looks like X. That's one thing. But if your goal is to learn to see because it feeds you in some way, that is something that a good teacher can really help with. I mean, I've had students who, learned to draw, who didn't necessarily want to be an artist, but they could learn to draw in a way that was more satisfying for whatever reasons. That's all. And art, there's a lot of pressure to be an artist, and it's silly. It's silly.
I've lately been working a lot with, like you've been talking about, connecting the emotions. And so I'm not trying to draw, and I also really don't care if anybody likes it.
That's great.
And then some fool went and bought it. And it's very confusing. Why did anybody buy that?
Ellen, you want to say something?
Bob, you said something earlier, something I read before too, is like children have more access and they're freer. What happens? You know what I mean? Like I've read one writer put it like, they take the crayons away or something. You know? Like at some point it's like you must be serious or whatever, we can't explore. So I just wondered if you could expand on that idea, because I just kind of love thinking about that and just accessing that a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, I think some of it is about the more we use language and the more we try and communicate and live in the world of language, which is useful. It's how we communicate. I'm all on board. But I do think that the idea of being analytic and literal is one piece of it, and we're less in touch with the instinctive and in the body. The other thing is a much longer philosophical conversation that I will just touch on. If you think about Newtonian physics, where, right, there's cause and effect. Things are literal, things are binary, and we're trying to understand the world in terms of this way. And again, that is really useful, right? But if you think about quantum physics, where it's really more about entanglement, and where actually it's not simple cause and effect, it's not simple binary singular, it's interactions. And I don't think that we have caught up with that understanding of actually how the world works. And so there's a lot of anxiety of what's the cause, what's the effect, who can I blame, what is the reason, and that makes it hard for the full complexity of inner experience to be in the world, right? Yeah.
And Ellen, there's a book I recommend, Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain.
Okay.
I forget the author's name.
Oh, thank you.
Because in it she tells this story. When we're little kids, we draw, a stick figure, a little house, the sun's up in the corner, a little tree, and we're happy with it. Somewhere around age 10 or 11, we go, those are stick figures. And at that point, whoever's influencing our life has a terrible influence, for better or for worse. If they say, keep going, that's good. Okay. If they say, you're not an artist, give up, you're in trouble. So I draw stick figures still today.
Yeah, I was just going to say in response to what you said, the word that's always stuck with me has been confusion.
Confusion.
When I go into confusion, that's a good space.
Yes.
Because I don't know how I'm going to work out of it. I don't know.
Yeah.
I just have to go in and sit with it.
And I'm using the word uncertainty, the
Yeah,
same way you're
exactly.
using confusion.
Yeah.
And I think that we have a lot in our culture that is not supportive of making that a safe, a safe internal space to explore. But I agree, that's the place.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I wanted to say that the words that I keep hearing are judgment.
Yeah.
And your whole process and all. And I always start the beginning of my year with an intention. I just finished the last couple of years with fear. And I realized that one of the things that brought fear to me was judgment. That I was judging myself, not being able to do this and defining what I am. So I came up with, I read somewhere, using judgment versus assessment. And that has been a great difference for me. Being able to assess it rather than put on it a judgment. And when you said the word void today, it was so impactful for me because I've been wanting to create. And I have just joined a writer's group, but I feel that I need to express artistically as well. And the word void was so important to me because it's been the chatter and what's my medium, what do I do, where do I start? Now I'm going to start from that void. And I'll just go from there. So putting judgment aside, assessing as I go, but using that. So this was very, very important.
That's a great sequence. Just real brief, I was at a Dharma talk with a Zen teacher once, and we had to partner with somebody, and they would share a challenging situation they were in, a problem, some major issue, and you were to sit there, forget judge, not assess. And you're like, what? It was fascinating because that's how you brought me to the memory of that. Because yes, to listen to somebody who's going through a terrible thing, you wouldn't assess. You would just be with that person, And to me, that was like the void. And yeah, it's really a fascinating place. to sit with the art, the writing, the friend, and just be. I don't think we think that's enough, maybe, but to have just pure presence, you know, pure heart. Yeah, thank you for nothing.
Yeah, I was, so I have an opinion which is not always popular in groups like this, but I actually don't think everyone is an artist. I think everyone has the capacity to be an artist.
Well said.
And I think that's a very important distinction as we enter teaching spaces. Because creativity, the capacity to be an artist, is an innate human skill. And if we can set aside the desire to make art or to be an artist, which involves capitalism, which involves, you know, esteem and training and privilege and time, and focus in on creativity, that is a much more accessible space. And I have to do that as a trained artist for myself all the time. To say I'm not making art today, I'm making scribbles on a paper. I'm, you know, making the wrong colored purple for the 100th time. So that's,
yeah. And Miranda has a wonderful book called Just Make Something.
Don't make art.
Don't make art, just write. No, there you go. That's good, right?
Yeah, don't make art, just make something.
Yes.
My master's.
Yes, and touches on themes that are near and dear to my heart as well.
And where is that available?
It's I hate to say it's on Amazon. Yeah. It's a self-published book, so it's a kind of print on demand, and it is 12 years old at this point, so be gentle if you read it.
But I do think the distinction, you know, you touch on things that I could give a whole other talk on. Because art, as it exists in our culture, is a whole, it's tied up into, oh, can you sell that? Is that good art? Well, it's good because someone paid a lot of money for it. That makes it good, you know? And when we try and get our sense of definition of what art is from that world, it's not so good. You know, it just is out of, let me put it a different way. It is out of sync with what I believe are the true creative instincts that can get you making.
But how do you feel when someone does pay a lot of money for your art?
Okay, really nice. Me personally, I get very ambivalent about the whole freaking thing with money. That's a whole other conversation. I do. It's complicated.
Depends on who the person is.
Yeah.
Depends on their relationship to the work.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it does change your relationship with your work too, though. I mean, I think we can't be too flippant about it because we've talked about this, but I'm making a current ceramic series, which are selling more than anything I've ever done before. And I made the same exact piece, one that was commissioned and one that was for myself, back to back in the studio the same exact day, with the same materials, the same, and just knowing that one of them was pre-commissioned changed my relationship to making them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So success had been, and so even when you know you're making art, sometimes I still have to put up all these reminders to say I'm still just making something. Because if I think I'm making art, it changes my relationship with what I'm making.
Did it make it more? You felt more pressured with the one, like less enjoyable, less connected.
It was less enjoyable. Probably more pressure, and it wasn't even. It was like I don't measure my clay. But I knew I needed to make them a specific size. That was the only paradigm. That was the only shift, was that they needed to be this size instead of whatever size. It just meant someone else was there with me. Someone else's demands out of space.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Kind of commissioning, right?
Yeah.
Being commissioned to create something for someone else.
I've actually learned I can't do that.
Yeah, me too. Do not.
Your person.
Yeah, but that's why I work full time not making art, because it's also a privilege not to be able to disconnect your art from money.
Software engineer. I mean, you know, right? Those guys, it's free. Yeah, but it is. It's a privilege. I mean, like, you know, it's complex, and I don't want to be dismissive of selling work. I want art to be something that, you know, people can do, and I think it would be great if most people who make art could live on that. That would be awesome, and it's really complicated, that's all. Yeah.
I think selling work as opposed to being able to live on your work sold are two completely different categories. I've never had an issue that selling something to someone affected that then I was going to continue doing work like that. Never has happened.
If you're
It could, but if I felt that was making my living from it, I would be very vulnerable for that.
Yes,
It's a whole different category.
It absolutely is. And I think it's important to remember that since, tribal days, when art was part of religious practice and spiritual practice and was looked at very differently in small groups of humans, there's always been some kind of patronage system for the arts. It was either governments or the church. And in the 19th century, the market started to take over. And the art, I look at religious paintings from the 17th century and 18th century and just am amazed at them. And I think one thing is that some of the artists who painted that stuff believed so deeply in what they were painting that it may have transcended for them the fact that they were doing it for an outside source. With government, what you got, if you look at the work of David, for instance, in France, you're getting artist propaganda. And that continued into the 20th century very deeply when the Soviet Union and Nazi Germany and the WPA all supported the arts, which was an amazing period, but it meant that artists were doing a certain kind of work for a certain kind of government. The market is really cruel, I think, and really affects how it feels to make art. And I think it's a lot of work to separate oneself from the market, especially if you show and if you sometimes, in my case, sometimes sell. But I find like doing a commission, oh my God. I mean, I used to do a lot of commission work to help support myself, and it was so different. It's really a lot of pressure. And I stopped painting for myself. And that was okay, but I decided I'd rather have day jobs too. And so I think we need to be clear on the effects of the market system and capitalism and consumerism on art practice, and make a decision about how we're going to approach being an artist, if that's what we want to be.
Well, and the other piece that, if you're taking this big historical view, is, art as a personal expression of self is relatively new this time. It's very new. It's modernism. Yeah, it's modernism. So, if you think about, not that I was there, but if you think about, sort of like pre-city, like tribal times, art was just part of everything. It wasn't something separate. It wasn't something elevated. It was just an expression of your daily life, right? It wasn't, and I find that really interesting. And I think in that way, I would guess, it was more connected to one's experience because there wasn't this requirement that it be good for it to be art, right? The idea of like art criticism and, only good art means you're a real artist. I'm not saying, I'm sure, we want to be able to make assessments, but I don't think in tribal times that was a concept. Right. I don't think so. And I think that, if you made a wonky little mirror for the ceremony you were having, I don't think it didn't count. I think it still worked. It was still art. And so, that's
it held magic.
Absolutely, it held magic. Because it held your intention in your heart. And I think in the modern age, we discuss, those foolish tribal people believed in magic. Who knows? Maybe they did. But I do think...
they definitely did.
Yeah. And if you think of like being able to be fully present and putting all of your, being willing to put all of yourself into something, there is a magic in that. That is magic. right? And so for us to be so dismissive of those foolish ideas is kind of sad, you know? Yeah.
Well, there are a lot of those practices that do still happen, which I think is also important. Well, there are contemporary communities that are making art for ceremony, that are making art for. So I think we should be very careful when we talk about tribes in past tense. And
thank you.
It occurs to me that in those tribal times, art was more on a par with music and dance. It's just people did it.
Absolutely.
And they got separated because art, we think of it as something that you can take and walk away with.
As a commodity.
Yeah. And a great example of a return to that is the Yo-Yo Mouse on the Silk Road. If you haven't seen it, it's wonderful. They have visual artists traveling with them that draws while they play, and there's other people that dance while they play. It's a fusion of the two.
If you look back, that table that's back there with the black mirror, those are obsidian mirrors. They come from Teotihuacan, Mexico, and I've trained there for many years. And the word Toltec from this part of the world, Mesoamerica, means artist of the spirit. And this is where even the word artist, becomes a whole different conversation too, because ultimately it will be about the precious life that we lived, and whatever you did that brought you joy, or the way that you developed as a human and went into the confusion and the deep, honest questions. That's how my training began in spiritual practice, in this lineage of artists of the spirits of the Toltec. And those obsidian mirrors, they would literally just look into them as a divination, and literally, if you just look, what will happen if you just focus on the black? Yeah. They ended up making their way to England, to Queen Elizabeth, and they're in a few museums in the UK because her advisor, John Dee, he was an astrologer and spiritualist, and was an advisor to the Queen, and he had brought them to her, so they made their way. But yeah, it's just artists of the spirit. I mean, how are we living life, ultimately?
The interesting thing, I think, is that it's in the modern day, it's easy to get into this thing of we should go back to some, ideal, just connected spiritual thing. And I don't think that's a helpful frame. Meaning, it's not either we're modern and knowledgeable or we're connected with our spirit. It's how do we live in this world now and still also bring in some embodiment, some of the less Newtonian and more experiential quality of attention. And I do want to say that this conversation today is that for me in a really lovely way. Like when I wrote the talk, what I really wanted is to kind of bring people into a space where they could play with me, be my playmates in this kind of conversation. And you guys, gold stars. You're wonderful. I'm very grateful.
I kept thinking we're making the soup.
We're making the soup.
Yeah.
We're making the soup. We're making the experience. Yeah.
And I think the experience is art. I think we formed this combination with people with education and experience is an art form in itself, just like a ceremony.
Yeah, ceremonial, like that.
Kind of reaching into all of our inner experiences and drawing them out. I think that's a big part.
Well, and I think that gets at what I was wanting to do, because there's so few spaces where it feels right or appropriate to bring all of this kind of stuff, right? I mean, it's not that people are doing it wrong, it's that it's not appropriate to do, it's not like I would go to my job and have a conversation like this, because but I want to create environments and moments
and happenings where it's like this. That's definitely a big part for me of what I want my art form to be, and thank you, because you guys really helped make that possible.
Congratulations, Robin.
Yeah.
I invite you to take a look at her art is over in the room.